Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants, to this session of Islam Study Circle. We begin this session with the discussion on a Quranic verse which is being presented before you on your screens. So these are verses in fact 63 to 65 of Surah Furqan, which is the 25th Surah. The text of these verses reads as وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. And the servants of the merciful are those who walk humbly on the earth. And when people overcome with frenzy, converse with them, they say peace. And they are those who spend their nights before their Lord, prostrating and standing, and are ones who keep praying, "Our Lord, protect us from the punishment of hell. Indeed, its punishment is ever clinging." So, as you can see, dear viewers, that this is part of the Quran, or these verses form part of the Quran, in which some of the traits of the believers are mentioned, and foremost among them is humility. And this humility is actually mentioned in their gait, in the walking style. And the Quran says, Ibadur Rahman allazina yamshuna alal ardi hauna, that the servants of the Almighty, they walk humbly on earth, they do not walk in an arrogant way. And a person who is humble in his gait, a person who walks humbly, is bound to be a person who talks and speaks and converses in a way in which he is not overimposing on others. He is a person in whose personality humility is found in every sphere of life. He would not wear clothes or partake in discussions in which arrogance in any way is visible. His personality or her personality has this ring of being down to earth, of this realization that we are humble servants of the Almighty. If anyone is great, then it is the Almighty Himself. As far as we are concerned, we of course have our own qualities. Each one of us has been blessed with a number of good traits, but then we also have our share of mistakes and shortcomings. And if we want to remain humble, if we would like to continue in this manner, and if I speak of this term as saying that if we cut ourselves to size, the best way to be humble in that case would be to always keep an eye on our mistakes and shortcomings. When we keep an eye on our mistakes and shortcomings, it keeps us humble. It keeps us, makes us realize that we are people, in spite of having many positive and brilliant traits, we still are marred with certain shortcomings and flaws that we need to overcome. So keeping an eye on our own personality, especially the flaws, this keeps us humble. It keeps in check this vanity that at times overcomes us. The important thing that this verse also mentions is this term Ibadur Rahman, which means servants of the most merciful. So the word Ibad, of course, refers to the fact that a person is always acknowledging the greatness of the Almighty. He is in a position to always reckon that he is being created by a supreme being. As such, he has to show his allegiance, his attention, and all his emotions of worship towards the Almighty. And if we are able to gauge this fact that the Almighty has created us in a way that all of us are in a position of creating our own mark, or are placing our own stamp, I would say, on the sands of time, then this is something that can be done if we are able to contribute in a positive way. So humility, of course, is something that is always there, but besides being humble, we have to be people who contribute as much as we can to the society. And in our dealings with people, we do come across people with whom conversation becomes difficult, with whom at times we get entangled. So the Quran here says that وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا, and when people overcome with frenzy converse with them, they say peace. So people who become overcome with emotions and frenzy, who instead of talking logically, talk out of their own emotions, they are loud in their voices, People who are servants of the Almighty, they don't engage in conversation with such people. They withdraw, and all they say is peace, which means that, well, I'm not being able to keep in pace with what you would require me to do, so I take my leave, and I not only take my leave in a way that I would no longer engage in conversation with you, but at the same time, I wish you well. So it's not that they withdraw abruptly. They turn away, they walk away in a very beautiful fashion by saying, peace, okay, I pray for you, may God guide you. And the thing that we have to realize here is that when we are overcome with emotions, and when the other person is really poking his or her nose in our affairs, or when some heated conversation is taking place, it is our natural instinct that we try to reply back to that person. It is here that the Almighty tells us that, well, if the other person is talking to you in emotions and in frenzy and in a state of rage, then if you talk back to him, there's going to be no use. Nothing will come out of it. So disengage in such circumstances, and disengage with a prayer. The Quran then says, وَالَّذِينَ يَبِيتُونَ لِرَبِّهِمْ سُجَّدًا وَقِيَامًا. And these are people who spend their nights before their Lord prostrating and standing. So we're talking about the Ibadur Rahman, the servants of the Most Merciful. So they are ones who spend their nights prostrating before their Lord and standing in prayer before Him. This is one of the very significant traits of the servants of the Almighty, which the Quran resounds at various instances. You'll find this mention of the believers, of the righteous, standing up at night and thanking the Almighty for His favors, and at the same time prostrating before Him and acknowledging the faults that might have been done during the day, and asking for forgiveness, exalting the Almighty, glorifying Him. So all these expressions, they emanate from them, and the best time for that is the night time. The Tahajjud prayer, of course, is being referred to here, that the servants of the Almighty, the servants of the Most Merciful, they choose that night time, which is the blessed time, about which the Quran and Hadith both tell us that this is the time in which the Almighty focuses His special attention towards earthlings, and makes them realize that if they make this effort to get up at in that part of the night when it is most difficult to get up, then the Almighty is also there to reward them for this effort. And as long as they are attentive to the Almighty and try their best to come out of their beds and, of course, prayer and stand up in prayer and prostrate before Him, the Almighty is going to honor this struggle and this effort. وَالَّذِينَ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اصْرِفْ عَنَّا عَذَابَ جَهَنَّمَ إِنَّ عَذَابَهَا كَانَ غَرَامًا. So there are people, these are servants of the Almighty, who continue to pray that, God, please make us stay away from the torment of the fire, make us stay away from hell, because the torment of hell is something which is going to cling. It's like ever clinging. It's something like ever clinging, which is not going to cease in any way. It's just going to increase. So their prayer when they stand up at night in particular is that, God, save us from the torments, make us people who obey you, so that we don't end up in this pit of raging fire. We are surrounded by angels, we are able to enter paradise. So the reverse is actually implied here, that when you save us from this hellfire, the consequence, of course, would be that we would be people who would be companions of paradise, who would be dwellers of paradise, enjoying the bliss of paradise. And of course, this is something which people would have earned from their own deeds, but at the same time, it would be also a favor of the Almighty, that He would have overlooked some of their minor sins and made them companions of this blessed place. Now we come to the Hadith of the day, and this is a narrative that we are going to read out from the Jami al-Sahih of Imam Muslim. So it says, An Abihi an-Nawas ibn Sim'an al-Ansari قال سألت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عن البر والإثم فقال البر حسن الخلق والإثم ما حاك في صدرك وكرهت أن يطلع عليه الناس. So An-Nawas ibn Sim'an al-Ansari radiallahu anhu narrates that I asked God's messenger about virtue and vice. He replied, virtue is good conduct and vice is what pinches your heart, and you would not like people to know about it. So, again, these beautiful and sublime words of the Prophet, they tell us how how beautifully and how effectively God's prophets, they put before us these simple realities of life in such a moving and effective style. So the Prophet once was asked about what good conduct is, what virtue is, and he said, Husnul khuluq, to be a man of character, to be a person of high moral character. That is all that can be said of a person who has that high moral character. So husnul khuluq is what virtue is. To be a person who is always looking after other people, who is always in a situation that he is looking beyond his own needs. He is kind, sympathetic, compassionate, altruistic. These are some of the traits of people who have this high moral character. So the Prophet has said that this is what virtue is. If you ask me what virtue is to become a good human being. And then the answer that he gave to vice was ma haka fi sadrik, anything which pinches your heart and you would not like it to be disclosed to other people. This is what vice is. And sure enough, this is what we feel that vice is. And to know what vice is, we don't need to go to any external barometer to judge what vice is. Our own conscience is the best judge of vice, and we know what right and wrong are. The Almighty has given us this blessing, I would say, in which distinguishing right from wrong is innately found in our own faculties. We know what right and wrong are through our own conscience. It's only when the conscience is lulled to sleep that we are not aware of right and wrong, but then that is also something of a punishment from God. When we stop using our faculty of conscience, when we stop following what the calls of our conscience are, then as a punishment for not following our conscience, it is lulled to sleep. But in most situations, in the majority of these cases, we know that this is not so. Our conscience is living and vibrant. And the Almighty has actually told us in the Quran that the awareness of right and wrong, they are found innately in us. And that is precisely why we feel this pinching in our own hearts when we do something wrong, or we even notice something which is going on in a bad way. And the second criterion which is mentioned here is that you would not like to share whatever wrong you have done. You would feel ashamed. And obviously people, when they do wrong, when they make mistakes, especially bad mistakes, and they are afflicted and marred by these shortcomings, they would like to hide them. They would like to conceal them, and no one would like to share the blemishes that he or she might have done. So this is how the Prophet has defined vice, that you feel this pinching in your heart and you would not like to get it disclosed to other people. So these are beautiful words from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which tell us what vice and virtue are, as far as these basic truths are concerned, as far as these basic evils are concerned. We are pretty much self-contained in them. And the thing that we have to always look out here is, as far as virtue is concerned, it is the biggest thing that we can achieve, and that is that to be a person of sound moral character, to be a person who is always compassionate and kind and caring and loving and generous towards all fellow human beings, to be able to contribute in the society in a very positive way, to make that contribution in a way which is unassuming, which is also humble on the one hand and also significant on the other. And looking after others and looking out for others is something that should come naturally to us. Let us now move on to the third section of our study circle, and this is an excerpt from the Gospel of Matthew, which is chapter number 6, verses 1 and 2. And this is basically admonishment and also a warning from Jesus that we must not show off generosity. So it is reported that he said, "Take care not to do your works before men to be seen by them, or you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." Of course, the word Father, as I've been clarifying in the earlier also, and also mentioned here as well, that in ancient languages, the word Father is also used for the same meaning as God and Lord, and there is a common word which connotes Father and God at the same time, and it is the context which decides when it is used such. So the word Father, for all practical purposes, when it is used here the way it is, it always refers to God Almighty. So take care to not do your deeds before men to be seen by them, or you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. When then you give money to the poor, do not make a noise about it, as the false-hearted men do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may have glory from men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. A very simple guideline being given to the followers of Jesus by himself, that do not show off what you're doing, do not make a noise, and do not be like people who are in the synagogues, referring specifically to the scholars, the rabbis and the Sadducees of the Jews, who would make this point to show off their virtue. They would announce whatever good they have done. And here the Almighty says that, well, if you announce the good that you have done in this world, then you already got your reward through the praises that people shower upon you. So you'll have no share in the hereafter. So again, if you have to be a person who is always connected to the Almighty, who is sincere in his attentions and intentions for the Almighty, then virtue has to be done in a way that it must not be shown off, it must not be announced. It should remain between God and the person himself, because this is something which will provide that inner elevation, that purification that is needed for us. The uplift that we need in our souls is provided if we hide these virtues. Of course, there are instances in which at times generosity or virtue has to be told, I would say, or done before people in order to inspire them. And in particular, I find that when you need to inspire your children, your next generation, to do good acts, at times you do these acts before them, so that they are motivated and inspired into doing these. So this could be an exception. Other than that, if the intention is to show off, the intention is to brag before people, then, as Jesus has beautifully said here, if you brag and show off, then the reward is that you are praised by the people around you. That is sufficient, and that is all that you're going to get, and nothing from God himself, because you did it for showing off, and you got that reward by people applauding you, by people showering their praises on you, and nothing more will happen. Neither will it have that effect on your own personality, that moral enhancement, that elevation of the soul, that uplift that you need from inside, that will go a-begging. So the important lesson which Jesus has taught here is that we must not brag, we must not announce and show off any good deed that we do, especially here, as it is said, that if we do so while making a noise, while making other people realize, then this is something that you have not done with that purity of intention for God Almighty. You're not sincere, you're not devoted to the cause of God. You have other designs and inclinations and other agenda before you. So with this, we come to an end to the third section of our study circle, and we go to the last of these sections, which is a small or short discussion which is moderated, and today's topic is dating and friendship. So I would request Mariam to take over, and please continue with the discussion.
What do you mean by dating and friendship?
So, dating started off, as I have often alluded to the fact, to find a marriage partner in 17th or 18th century France. And it was basically a way of getting to know the opposite gender, the suitors, the proposed people, and it would often take place in the presence of elders. So this is how it evolved, and basically every person who grows up needs a marriage partner, and it's not the time that we are living in that we always have these alternatives before us in which can reach out to father or to reach out to people who might not be connected to us in a way that we are not just confined to our own inner circle. So today, in the presence of social media and many other platforms, of course, these means have expanded, but the thing is still there, that you would like to know the person that you are going to marry. So basically, dating or pre-marital contact with the opposite gender is a way to find out your proposed partner or your own spouse. And as long as it remains in decent norms, it is something which can always be availed. And to find out how your spouse is like, or what he or she would like to expect from you, is something that can be done. But a word of caution here might be inappropriate, and that is that obviously this dating should not expand into hanging out the way it is done today, not only hanging out, but spending time in privacy, even spending nights with one another. This is obviously not warranted at all. And the second thing that might also be taken into account is that in spite of the fact that you get to know your spouse through these premarital instances of contact, one should always be prepared that once a person gets married, the person that you're going to experience after that marriage is going to be a very different person. And basically, marriage, if I'm allowed to say these words, is a gamble. It's a risk that we have to take. And however much we might know our spouse before we marry her or him, the person is not going to be the same when you meet that person or encounter that person after marriage, because before marriage the contact was limited and the best show was put on. But it is 24/7 exposure after marriage, and the habits kick in, the good and the bad habits that we might not fully know before marriage. They have their own role to play. So it's not that we should think that dating or knowing our spouse beforehand is a guarantee for a successful marriage in any way, or at least it's like something which can really go very far in doing so. More often than not, a lot of cases that we have seen and witnessed and experienced, they end up unfortunately in a bad way, even after the fact that the two spouses knew each other very well. So whether it is through an arranged marriage in which you have a very, very limited exposure to your future spouse, or it is in the form of that exposure that we call dating, or let me rephrase it to call it as modest dating or religious dating, in which the purpose is not just to be, it's not a fun activity, it's more of finding out who the person that you would like to marry is. So whether you are able to know that person, or whether your parents choose a person for you, or you have a very limited exposure to that person, the thing that has to be understood is that these are all means of getting into that marital bond, and the person that you're going to engage and come in contact after marriage is going to be a different person. So the key word here that has to be understood is that yes, marriage is a gamble, it's a risk, but to make it successful, dating is not something which is going to guarantee it. Yes, what is going to guarantee a successful marriage, more or less, is the fact that you become an accommodating person, that every spouse becomes an accommodating person, whether a husband or wife. And what do I mean by that? I mean, the meaning of this is that you are able to adjust with the habits of the other person, thinking that the other person is adjusting with you for all those habits. And marriages are not to be looked upon as ideal relationships. They are more of working relationships between a husband and a wife. Ideal relationships, we can always think of them as an ideal, but in this world, seldom do we find that idealism being materialized. So to be a person who is able to accommodate the spouse, who is able to give the spouse enough space, and at the same time not barge into the privacy of the other spouse, is something which is very important. It will groom a family, it will create a family which will be based on trust. It will be based on that approach in which you are able to contribute to the growth of your partner, not imposing yourself, and at the same time realizing that to understand that basically it's a relationship in which sacrifice, accommodation, and looking after your own partner are the key words, I would say.
Okay. Raouf, please go ahead.
I hope you can hear me. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So as you said that dating definition can be changed. As you said that in our culture, dating can be defined to not for a fun activity, but to know each other. Mm-hmm. So in that case, what I think, so dating and friendship can be correlated, and multiple dating can be allowed if. So we are basically talking about to know the partner or to find the right partner, and it has some etiquettes, it has some limitation. So in my view, multiple dating, in that limitations we are talking in the norms of dating. So multiple dating should be allowed.
Well, actually, multiple dating, if you, I mean, if the purpose, of course, is to find someone, it is perfectly okay, because it's not that you are pledging your allegiance with one's partner, or you telling this partner that, yeah, well, yes, that you are now in a relationship with that person. So we have to understand this, that dating is not, I mean, we don't prescribe the fact that you enter into a relationship. So if this is understood clearly, then yes, you are right that it's like finding out a suitable match for your own self, and you could have more than one options for that, because you need to decide the best option. And obviously this is something which the other partner would also be knowing, and he or she would also have the same choice at the same time, that looking out for people who might be suitable to you. You could do this in a way that you enter into simultaneous assessments, I would say. These are evaluations. These are basically exposures done in order to find the best thing that you would like to happen to you. So yes, I would say that this is the right way to do so. If you enter into multiple relationships, I mean, the word relationship again is under it has a different connotation here, that all that you're doing is trying to evaluate and assess the person that you would like to marry.
I was talking in a sense that we have changed the definition of dating. In Western culture, definition of dating is something, a fun activity in Western cultures.
So I actually related this to the foundation of this term. You see, in 18th century France, when this started off, it began with the same connotation which I am just referring to. The Western concept of dating has evolved, and what we see today is a different concept of dating than it actually was when dating began. So it was called as chaperoned dating in France, which means that it was always done in the presence of elders. People would meet in groups; they would not meet in private, and it was meant as a means to find out future partners for marriage. So the original dating that with which the whole concept started off is very close to what I'm referring you to here. However, as I said, this concept evolved and drastically changed, and today, of course, in the West, dating has an entirely different perspective, and it has something of a very different ring about it. So we are not going to condone any of those dating practices that today are rampant in the West.
Bismat Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
So my comment was, a part of discussion was, Dr. Saleem, like in Pakistan, I when we were growing up, there was this sect, called the Smileys, who had a wonderful way of introducing boys and girls to each other in the Jamaat Khana. So the kids almost grew up together. Everybody went to the Jamaat Khana regularly, and these are my friends I'm talking about who were growing up with me. Okay. I would hear of them going to the Jamaat Khana, and it was a real fun scene for them because they were all young at that time, even elementary school, then they graduated to secondary school. So when all these youth were growing up together, automatically a lot of them developed feelings where they thought that, because they got to know each other so well, that they got married, and it was not frowned upon in their circle of people that boys and girls are, having dinner together or lunch together at the Jamaat Khana, and doing, in essence, getting to know each other with those social meetings. So what is your idea for something like that? Because in our culture, mostly people start hanging out with each other when they're much older, and then that physical aspect of love and that emotional, the Western concept of love, and then the physical attraction, chemistry takes over, and people sometimes make bad decisions based on attraction and less on how the person actually is. Wouldn't mingling of youth be better than it is when you're much older? Because then, as we say, human nature is such, or our fitrat is such, that attraction takes over, and sometimes people forget about how the person is, and they're more attracted to the physical aspect of that human being. So I don't know, what is your thought on that? What do you...
So you see, we have to understand this, that any exposure which is done in a protective environment, in a controlled environment is fine if it is done at the time or near about the time when you enter into the age of adolescence, or slightly after that. Of course, marriage is something which is done much later after adolescence. Because if that is done in a way that you get exposure at a very early age, as we do in co-education schools, then it's difficult to get that controlled environment. I mean, you just cannot control the environment because the exposure is there for 8 or 9 hours. You just cannot monitor the children all the time. And today we see that single gender schools are once again being thought of in the West, and they think that a lot of excesses that have been committed are because of these co-education schools, in which not only there is this problem of sexual attraction and excesses that arise as a result, but also there is a tremendous competition between boys and girls, and unhealthy competition. And more often than not, girls, they outdo boys. I mean, they outshine boys, and this produces a lot of psychological effects. So I can see something of a reversion towards same gender schools or single gender schools because of these issues. So I think that I would go for the fact that as far as the environment is, you are able to control the environment, as was done a couple of centuries ago when dating started off, because people near the time of their marriage would be made to meet one another in the presence of their parents, or in a group where they could not commit any excesses, which is the case today. So I think this is something which is if it can be managed. After all, today people grow up in families. We still have a joint family system in which cousins, they get to know each other very well at a very early age. It happens in these joint family systems, and without even making any effort, you find that marriages within joint family systems, they evolve because of relationships which have developed between cousins. So as I said, it all depends on the nature of this protective environment that you can offer, and at the same time also on the fact that you're able to educate your children that you have to be a person who must be pure in your feelings, you must not commit any excesses, your eyes must not take any liberty in gazing at the opposite gender, which is a very challenging thing to do when people are growing up. So you see, if the grooming is such that you have trained your younger children in a way that they are made to focus on other activities of life, and they are also given this grooming in which right and wrong, especially guarding one's gaze, is something of a norm, and at the same time you're also able to offer that protective environment, then yes, I would say I would go along with that. But I mean, exposing them to each other without any control or protection, I would say, would be a huge gamble. And if you see some of the statistics today in such areas, maybe many years ago it was much more fruitful, but today I don't think it could be, or it is rather in a situation that you have that grip over that whole situation. So I would just give my answer in principle. So as long as the protective environment is there, I see no harm in it.
Okay, and another point of discussion I had was if it's okay to continue. Is that okay to?
Yes. Yes,
so the Western, I think with the exposure of the world to each other and the world becoming kind of shrinking, the exposure of love, I feel that feeling that was reserved for not someone you meet instantly, I think has really spoiled the institution of kids wanting to get married. I think somehow marriage has to be marketed to children in a sense where they're told that this is more of a contract, where it's you find someone who you think you can get along with, and love happens. Love follows. Affection follows. Once you get to know a person and you like them, blah blah blah. Because arranged marriages seem to have worked much better in our system, in the Eastern system, than the West, but the divorce rate is so high. So I somehow feel that that love thing has taken over, that you're supposed to fall in love and get married. No, you're supposed to, find someone who suits you, because the system of arranged marriage worked very well in the Eastern culture. So I think that somehow that something has to be written about that or marketed to the youth. What do you think of that? Because
I understand. You see, this is an area in which it is extremely difficult to reach out to our younger generation, because dating has made it a norm for individuals, for couples who are suitors, to them it is falling in love, which is the first step. I mean, unless you fall in love, you don't have a relationship. You don't even think of continuing with that. And this is one area where I agree with you. I mean, of course, with other points as well. But in particular, this is one area. Not only do I agree with you, but the other thing is that in order to convey this to our younger generation, the whole model that we are following in the West, I mean, it is going totally against what we are proposing here. Because you see, it's not that limited exposure that I'm talking about here that is being offered in our Western dating societies. It is that complete exposure which is there. I mean, you're fully exposed, and as a result, this has become a norm that it's not to find out who is suitable to you, so that you can go on and proceed with any marriage activity. Rather, it is how you feel for that person initially, and that only happens through the heart. It's like a heart-to-heart conversation which happens, and you see, this is but natural when the exposure is immense, and that is precisely why I said that love, it kicks in. I'll use the word kicks in when you give this unlimited exposure. If the exposure is limited, then it'll be the other way around. It'll be more utilitarian based. It would be more of a utility that you'd be using, rather the other way around, in which you have that passion or that feeling developed first, and then you look about the other things. And precisely that is why you see so many couples, for them, marriage no longer remains a thrill. It is something you are already exposed to. A greater part of that is already exposed to you before you get married. And it's like a post-marriage scenario in which you are very similar to what your pre-marriage situation was. And the institution, what it has to offer, it somehow ceases to offer because of what you take away from it, because of that huge exposure before you get married.
So the adventure aspect of it goes away because you already know.
It goes away. Yes, the thrill goes away, and that is like a norm that you come across. And this is but natural. If you are living with your partner, I mean, okay, that is an extreme thing. But even if you're not living with your partner, you're not cohabiting, but you are going out with your partner, I mean, for years and years before you get married. So you see, that thing only goes on for a limited period of time, and you get fed up. And that is why you find relationships breaking up and you entering into another relationship. And also, as you rightly pointed out, the percentage of divorces which are taking place is huge, simply because of this premarital exposure, in which on most occasions you have that euphoria, you have that imagination, what is going to happen after marriage is going to be like this and this, but it never happens, because that has already happened before marriage.
Already lived it, actually, so there's no exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. I like the point that you talked about. The honeymoon phase sort of dies out before even getting married.
So you have a premarital honeymoon.
That is true.
One comment that I wanted to bring up was regarding the same gender or same-sex schools, is that I went to an all-girls school. Granted, it wasn't in the West, but there were a lot of lesbians. And I think, with adolescents and people's hormones going crazy at times, if they're not controlling them, then instead of, finding yourself a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you're finding yourself the same-sex partner. So I think, personally, the more emphasis should be on the person to not seek out affairs rather than, and like save yourself until marriage, rather than, hey, don't talk to the opposite sex, but now you're talking to your same sex.
Yeah. So yes, you're right about that. The danger is there because of the nature of things that are happening now. So the same gender school or all girls schools or all boys schools, as I said, it's not just a gender issue which crops up. It's also that competition issue in which psychologically it's like the male gender pitted against the female gender, and a lot of unhealthy competition taking place as a result. So I'm not saying that it's something which is fully thrashed out. What I'm saying is that we often go to extremes. So extremes breed extremes. When we think of some of the pros and cons of common gender schools, instead of maybe looking to some of the remedies, we take a drastic step and go to the other extreme. So what I'm saying is that we have to be balanced in our approach and realize that both have their pros and cons, and it's not by changing the system that you're going to change the whole situation. It's rather by controlling and grooming people that you can bring that change.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Isabel, please go ahead.
Okay, so my point over here is that as you said, that the grooming of the people is very necessary. So it was regarding maturity, that if we give this, for example, in Pakistan, this system of dating or controlled courting is being presented, then people over here are already too much tangled and fed up of this super conservative orthodox atmosphere, and boys are already and girls are trying to find a loophole and space in which they can contact the other. So I feel that when such thing might be exposed without a proper and a long time process, gradually admitted in the society, if it's just given as a whole package to the society, there can be so people take it as a time pass and exfoliate stuff. So that was my point. What do you think about it?
I think that's pretty much the case. Yes, you have made your point. It's important here. But you see, the important thing to realize here is that, I mean, there are a lot of things that we are not able to control. You see, we are living in a society in which we face the society the way it has developed. And I mean, talking and discussing the things that we are doing now, they are basically more of an intellectual exercise, because societies are not going to do what we advise them. They are going to do what they are already doing. So that is something that is always there. But yes, to make it a healthy society in which we are able to control intellectually give input to these things is something that we should always target, because these discussions, they are seldom going to affect any practicality or change in situation. It's more going to affect what we can do in our own environment, in our own society, for our own children, our nieces and nephews, and maybe people of our who are under our own influence. So I think this is also a realization that we should always make, that in spite of these huge claims that we might make or give these grand opinions, the thing is that at the end of the day, who is going to listen to us? I mean, except that we in our own family, in our own closed environment, or closed, by closed I mean to the people who are near us, that we can talk about and have an effect. Otherwise, it's all more discussion and idealism that we are exposed to.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We have another comment in the chat that says, multiple dating means what? Is it something like we meet two people separately in the same day in order to pick one of them as a future husband/wife? And then if that's the same, then it's like visiting more than one family and giving our decision in favor of one, which sometimes results in quarrel and jealousy amongst the other families who are expecting themselves to be selected. Shouldn't we go to other options only when we're done with the first option?
Well, you see, this is more of a question of strategy. At times, you might confine yourself to a single family. At times, the situation presents yourself in a way that something comes along. I mean, without your own planning, you get to know someone proposes to you, and you are already maybe under discussion. So if you're at the beginning or at the rudimentary stage of all the happenings, maybe you can do it simultaneously, because you see you've not finalized anything. But yes, if you are in a stage in which you are thinking seriously about some particular proposal, then it is not advisable that you enter into multiple relationships. And people don't do so. I mean, why would they do so? Unless it's for fun. I mean, only when it is for fun that we do so in such situations. Otherwise, it's always a controlled decision. And the purpose is not to just indulge, but the purpose is to find out a future partner.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. Bisma Tirmizi Ahmed, please go ahead.
Dr. Saleem, my observation, or I don't know what I would call it, is that, when people get serious about getting married, everybody is in their prime, men and women, and they are at their peak of beauty or charm or whatever the physicality, whatever you may want to call it. So isn't it difficult to convince a young person now? Well, we're much older, but that that's something that you're supposed to disregard. I mean, how does one? What is your opinion on that? Because I sometimes feel that the institution of marriage, or the concept of a man and a woman coming together from the beginning of time, the reason they are so beautiful in that prime is so the other gender can find them attractive. And that is also a reason why, or one aspect of why somebody's, okay, I get along with this person also, and they're good looking also. So that is a package. So how is it that, what is your opinion on the fact if you kind of just snub this to the side and say, okay, nahi, look for someone who's more your style or more your personality type? How is it that...
Yes, I get you. Yeah, actually, this is how your grooming, is going to affect you, in which you tell your young ones, your children and people that you know, that as they say, that beauty is not skin deep. A person has to be beautiful from inside as well. And in fact, inner beauty is perhaps, it has more significance and more importance. We cannot deny physical attraction. This is something that as human beings, it is our weakness that we go for appearance, and it's okay. I think it's not something very wrong. However, totally depending on appearance and disregarding a person from inside is not the right approach. So I think the grooming of our younger generation should be that they have to find the person from inside, how that person is from inside, because beauty is not going to last long, maybe 10 or 15 or 20 years. And if you have that beauty in appearance and you are not beautiful from inside, very soon after marriage, clashes and all sorts of bad things are going to happen. So I think it's more of making our young ones realize that marriage is not all about looks. It's about adjusting. It's about emotional support. It's the way you make your spouse grow through your own support. It makes you realize that you can support your partner emotionally and psychologically, because as human beings, we need this. And of course, we need to have a family as well. So basically, the institution of marriage, what it stands for, what its paradigms are, that is something that we need to communicate more cogently to our younger generation. And sadly, I think we are not being able to do so, again, because of the fact that it's that external appearance that takes the better of us on most occasions, because this is, it's like glittering gold that you are seeing right in front of you, and you just cannot have that courage, I would say, or that insight in which you look beyond that. And again, we have to keep on reminding our younger generation that this is not going to last long, and a beautiful thing is one thing, and living with a beautiful thing is another thing, because beauty in that case has to be a beauty that relates to your habits, to your personality, to your character and conduct. And if you're not beautiful in those aspects, then physical beauty is just going to be a temporary thing, and it's just going to fade away one day. And even before it fades away, you might not be in a position to have that thing go on. So I think it's more a question of making people wiser and teaching the institution of marriage. I am always a very strong proponent of the fact that all these issues have to be taught as a subject, maybe, as a workshop to our younger generation, because they get to know what exactly marriage is, what exactly is the scheme of God, what should they expect, and why must they not be very idealistic in their approach. So these are the things which we need to teach our younger lot, either through some construction in the classroom, or maybe if adults can do this, which I don't find taking place these days.
Yeah, another thing I noticed, Dr. Saleem, is that these websites, I don't know, this is something which is very interesting. These websites where young children are meeting, lots of times people want to are attracted to meet someone or get to know someone who's similar to them. Now, similarity is okay in friendship, but too much similarity is also something that somehow, if you could talk to the youth and tell them that, you're not looking for somebody who's completely like you. Otherwise, it's boring also. So
of course, it's not only boring, it also invites clashes, because if you have something very similar, so it's bound to clash. It's if you have more variety, yeah. So you see, these are all points that we need to teach our prospective suitors, and tell them that if you are indulging in courting and in dating, then the purpose has to be entirely different. You just cannot find a 100% match. That's not going to be, and that is not the right approach. A 100% match is not going to be there. And if you think that someone is very close to your own personality, then you are sadly mistaken, because this is not the same as that person would appear once he or she gets married. A new person emerges after marriage. So this is something that we need to keep on discussing, and as far as we can teach our younger generation.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Saleem. My last point that I wanted to bring up before moving to Q&A is, for those of us who are sort of in this phase where, you know, you're trying to find a partner. I know for my parents, when people reach out to them, they like send out a bio data and like some pictures, and I can't help but feel like it's almost, you know, sort of being seen as a commodity in a sense. It's sort of an embarrassing feeling, and yeah, I don't know, you know, if is this a bad way of me thinking about it? I know other people do the same too. So like, how do you go on about this?
Well, I think that it's a question of a personal sensitivity that we might have. So I think that, I mean, if we are not very oversensitive, we need to understand that if you are sending your picture or your CV or your biodata, I mean, they are the only means for the other person to know you. It's not that you are selling yourself in any way or degrading yourself in any way. It's just a means of introduction. So you see, not only when we do it privately in the form of exchanging information, through marriage websites in which we communicate so that our particulars are left at that website. Again, the purpose is introduction, so that people who have similar requirements can be matched. So I think that, I mean, yes, this at times does seem odd, but on the other hand, we also need to understand that practically this is the only way to introduce ourselves to other people. And if I think this practical aspect is taken into consideration, then perhaps that sensitivity towards thinking ourselves to be a commodity might go away. But yes, at times it does feel like a commercial activity. But I do need to, I mean, I do think that we need to maybe change this mindset that, I mean, the purpose is not to sell anything or to show off anything. It's just introduction. So there is no other way to introduce yourselves, I mean, about yourself, unless you disclose your particulars and give a picture. Because you see, the decision is not going to be made on this. And the decision is, I mean, this is just a starting point in which you see someone and read about his or her particulars. It is the next step, which is now going to maybe decide what exactly is the process. So I would say that it is more of an introduction, and maybe boys and girls should think that this is more of an introduction, and it's not like, I mean, being treated as a commodity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem, for that clarification. And with that, we'll start with the Q&A. So Sattar Ahmed, please go ahead.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum. So basically, my question with the whole, dating versus the very like traditional approach where, the guy and the girl who are destined, who are about to get married, they aren't allowed to even, meet each other, and it's the guardians like who are pretty much doing everything. So if like marriage itself is a gamble, then like in essence, like what's the difference between, actually, meeting your potential partner versus your guardians being like, the intermediate between you and your potential thing. That was like my question. And then, yeah. So
you see, I mean, this is, I mean, you see what we say when we talk about the fact that some limited exposure could have been made before marriage. So you see, I mean, at least, I mean, looks are important to many people in some situations. So when you see your prospective partner, have a glimpse of your partner and slightly have a short introduction, so all that you get to know is that introduction that you might have of your partner. It's in no way a guarantee to the fact that it's like a successful marriage, that as soon as you get that introduction, that all that you're going to do is, I mean, just proceed in a very happy way. So it's basically a pre-introduction of someone that you might, someone who might become your lifelong partner. So if it is taken to be an introduction, I don't see any harm in it. At times it is also very useful. So yes, the gamble is still there. But then, I mean, there is this, one part of that gamble at times can be reduced is that you're not going to see your partner for the first time when you get married, as is the case or used to be the case with our previous generations. You already know who that person is to a slight extent, like you know the appearance, you know the basic habits or the basic inclinations or the basic interests of your spouse. So I think this is like reducing one small tiny portion of that gamble in which I mean, you're not leaving everything to that final day, but you're in some sense you know what's going to happen. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also is reported to have said that it's always good to see your prospective partner, lest after seeing your partner you have a different view. So I do think that if this exposure, as I said, is for the purpose of introduction, then that gamble, I mean, it's still a gamble, but some portion of that gamble is taken care of.
Okay, so the risk is kind of reduced. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not drastically reduced. All that the reduction is that, I mean, you know who the person is to a small bit of extent. At least the habits may be. I mean, when you come across your spouse and you talk to your spouse about the interests and the life-changing activities that he or she might be doing. So it's like having a very small or short introduction. So that, I mean, that at times creates that comfort zone for you to proceed.
Of course. And so the whole, directly engaging with the potential partner, as long as it's done in like, I don't know, a respectful, modest manner, it's fine then.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I would say it's recommended, but one should not bank on it.
Of course. Okay.
Thank you. Isabel, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Okay, my question is that, for example, as I know someone and as I'm having a colleague and we are in touch for a long time and we see there's a lot of, we're having compatibility and there are so much sameness, there's conciseness and harmony in our ideologies, the way we see things and the things that we prefer. But the only problem is that person might not be a Muslim or other many people whom I might know, as for example, in my case, are Jews. And in comparison to as many Muslim people who might have approached me, I never felt that compatibility, and I always felt that change of seeing things. What might seem good to me might seem bad to them. What might seem blasphemy to them might seem kind of not that blasphemy, rather a critical and fine approach to me. So when I go with, so just because of the reason that other person might be a Jewish, although we share the same blood, the same history, the same God of Abraham. So will it be wise to say no to such proposals?
So you see, besides so many other things that we have just talked about regarding compatibility, one important thing is, of course, the ideology that we follow as in religion. So regardless of whether the person is Jew or Christian of course, these Jews and Christians are like our brothers, they are people of the book, they are recipients of the same message as we are. So yes, they are very close to us, but we need to understand that if the basic belief that we have to stick to is monotheism, and if that is something which is being followed by a person who does not belong to Muslims, and as you said, is more of is like a neighboring religion, I would say, or a religion that was a precursor to the religion that we follow, I don't find any harm in it as long as the person is a strict monotheist, as well as the fact that he is a practicing person and he's following the norms. But one thing that is still compromised, of course, is the fact that a lot of things that you do as a Muslim would not be there. For example, some of the acts of worship, the rituals of worship that we follow, especially when you talk about children that you're going to raise, it does become a point of conflict for them as well, that they don't know which religion to follow, whether the religion of the father or the mother, when both are different. So these are some of the areas that I do find there's a point of concern. So, I mean, unless things have been worked out to their details, that how would you come close to such a person, at the same time also be able to be in a position that some of the things that you'd like your children to follow are not compromised to the extent that you think they should not be, can be done so. So there's a bunch of things that need to be worked out, and if you think that they are worked out, then maybe this is something that can be taken as an option. But we also need to remember this, that this marriage with the people of the book is allowed for women. I mean, in case it's the case in which women belong to one of these groups. As far as men are concerned, we find that the Quran, the way it has mentioned this directive, that they should not marry outside their own circle of Muslims. So that is something that is a point of consideration.
Thank you very much.
You mean to say
oh yeah,
it's
please
just
go ahead.
they can marry the women of the book, but not the women
But not
of
the men.
marry the people of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Rauf, please go ahead.
Sir, I have a very little question about how can we find out that sometimes we are in a relation, in a friendship relation with someone, and after some time we feel that we should be getting in a relationship like marriage. So that previous friendship can we call dating, or it is something else in this background, in this perspective?
Are you talking about the same person? I mean, which you were having a relationship and now you're getting married with the same person?
Yeah, relationship as a friendship. I'm talking about same person, basically.
I don't see any problem here. I mean, all that you were doing prior to getting married was to, if I understand correctly, get to know that person in a way that you have a fair introduction to that person. If that happens, and then ultimately it transpires that you marry that person, then I mean, all that you have done is you've gotten introduced to that person the way you want it to be, and then that introduction has led to your marriage.
So my basic question was, previously it was not meant to be a dating thing, which we have discussed previously.
So what was it meant to be?
It was meant to be a friendship in the very start.
I mean, right. So, I mean, for that, we have a different paradigm. I mean, as it is, we have to understand that friendship with the opposite gender, whether it's our colleagues, it could be our cousins, it could be other people around us, you have to have that modest relationship. And if you call that modest relationship as friendship, then it should be a meaningful interaction in which you have a formal relationship in a way that you know that you're not getting overexposed in any way or indulging in loose talk or small talk or the way we do with friends. So I think in such cases, originally we need to understand that friendships in such issues in which you get that exposure with the opposite gender is something that has to be, again, in a controlled environment. It should not be the same as you are friends with your own gender. For example, if you have friends of your own gender, the way that you make friends with the opposite gender, of course, is greatly different. So for them, it has to be in a controlled environment, in a controlled way. You follow the norms of decency. And then, of course, if that leads to marriage, it's perfectly okay, because, I mean, this is how things do develop. You get those feelings developed in you. So my answer would be that friendship in itself should be reviewed in case of the opposite gender, and it should always be in a very controlled and decent environment.
So basically, okay, that is totally fine. Definitely, limitations and norms could not be breached at any cost.
Could not be breached, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Akram Bhatti, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So just like you know that where we live here in America, this is a major problem for the parents. And some people, mostly they said that, well, make sure that they turn Muslims before you marry them. Some turn Muslims, and some openly say, no, I'm going to keep my religion, you keep your religion. And kids are so stubborn, they say, well, we got to get married. Also, and afterwards, this main question, like you already discussed, that main question arises about kids, which way the kids would go. And if the parents are practicing good Muslims, and kids sometimes are not, and they'll say, well, then the other person will say, look, your name is Muhammad Akram, my name is John, Wagger, whatever. And so you don't practice, I don't practice, what's the difference? So that other question comes in. And then sometimes the only way parents would agree to the kids' marriages, they would become Muslim. So they would become Muslim in a ceremony, and after that, things go back. And like you said, you find out a reality of the person after you get married. So they found no, they are the same day. So it's a major problem here with the parents.
Right. So correct. I mean, this is a social issue, and the important thing is that we are violating one very important area or very important approach, and that is that, I mean, religion cannot be or should not be changed merely for one's convenience or merely to get married. I mean, religion is a way of life. It's an ideology that you follow. So it should not be sacrificed for the sake of some other issue that you have at hand. I mean, if conversion has to take place, it must be in the natural way that one really wants to convert, and not merely for the purpose of marriage, because such conversions will never last, nor they are the right way in which you suddenly change your ideology merely to adjust your partner. I think if you are staunch and if you are sincere towards the ideology that you follow, it is only befitting that if you have to change it, then it has to be an intellectual decision. It has to be a well thought of decision, not merely for the sake of marriage. But unfortunately, because of the fact that in societies which are multicultural, in societies in which there are very different faiths living together, when feelings develop, it's too late by that time to make children realize. So I think in such cases we don't need to make children realize and let them do what they would like to do, because if they are not doing something in a way that they need to get religion involved in it. So as parents also, I think we should just let them do what they want, because this was something which had to awaken in them much before marriage, and the importance of faith, the importance of religion should have been there with them, either through their parents or maybe through other areas that we are able to inculcate ideologies. But if that has not happened, then merely for the sake of marriage, when you force children to change religion, I don't think this is the right way, and it always backfires.
So kids want the blessing of the parents, and the only way they know they're going to get blessing is.
So I mean, you can tell your children that you'll still give your blessings if they do whatever they are doing, because you see, all that parents need to do is make them realize that they are doing something wrong. But they still, I mean, it's like saying that I'll support you whatever you do, but I don't agree with you. It's difficult for you to behave in such a way, but then this is what the challenge is, that you support your children in making their decisions. You tell them that you don't agree with your decisions, but you're going to support them for their decisions, which means that you are there for them in spite of the fact that you don't agree with what they are doing. So I think this is the thing that we parents need to gear up to, that we disagree, but we still support you for the fact that you are an individual, you have a right to choose your partner. We have told you what right and wrong are. Now the decision is yours. Whatever decision you make, we are going to back you. So if the difference of opinion is made clear, then if you're going to back them, it's not that you're going to support them in any way. You're saying yes to what they're doing. All that you're saying is that we would not agree with what you're doing, but since you have decided, and because I'm your father or your mother, I'm not going to back away as a father and mother. I'll still give you my blessings.
Can I ask you another question from same thing, if you allow me? One is the monotheism, like Jews and Christians and all that, and one is Hinduism. One kids say, I want to get married to a Hindu, and then they also declare a Hindu. I mean, the girl and the boy, they say, we're going to keep our own religion. Even after marriage, you allow us, you don't allow us, we're going to keep our own religion. Then what parents.
I mean, you see, as I said, I mean, if the children have decided or they have made the decision, as a father, if you ask me, I'll support that. But if you tell your, I mean, if they ask you that, well, they believe in one God or they're also monotheists, I would say it's not just a question of monotheism. It's to be a person who belong to the people of the book. So monotheists who belong to the people of the book have been allowed. I mean, and to spell out, they are just Jews and Christians. So Hindus don't fall in that category at all. I'll give that opinion. But if the child insists that he or she would like to marry a Hindu, as I said earlier on, in spite of my difference in opinion, I'll still support my child.
Very hard. So
it's very hard. I know it's very difficult. It's very hard. But this is what we have to realize, that as parents, our responsibility ends here. After expressing our opinion to them, all that is God wants us to do is to let them know what we think is right or wrong. The decision is to be left to them, because now they are responsible for that decision before God. We are not responsible.
Thank you.
Faraz Ahmed, you're up next. Please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Sir, I have a question that might not be related to today's topic, but it is regarding Itmam Hujjat. And I know that Ghamidi Saab and many other scholars of Farahi School of Thought explain it, and it is said that everybody in that era, 1440 or something years ago, was sure that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the last prophet of God, and he has explained religion very comprehensively, and nobody has any doubt that Islam is not the true religion. So that is a law of ultimatum that is called Itmam Hujjat. But in today's era, we find it very difficult that in a time when communication and transportation system is not very modern, it is not that efficient as well, and it is very possible that in those 8 states or in the kingdom of Arabia, there would be so many people who would not be sure about Islam and Prophet Muhammad. But when it came to the punishment that it applied, then all of them were punished. All those citizens of the 8 states where Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sent his letters, and all the people who lived inside Arabia. So in today, how can you explain to a modern person that everyone in that era was sure and finally was punished when he didn't accept Islam?
I think what you need to understand here is not just people who are living outside of Arabia. The 12 kingdoms to which letters were sent, look what happened within Arabia. I mean, how are we sure that everyone within Arabia got that message? So if that is understood clearly, you'll find that exactly the same mechanism was followed. The same time period was given. The way truth was made conclusive was not just through letters, because letters were just a manner of introducing Prophet himself. It was the whole process of retribution that took place for the people of Arabia, the people of the book, and the idolaters at the conquest of Mecca, and after that, which became a visual proof for people who are living adjacent to those countries. So it's not just the letters that we're going to talk about. It's the fact that for 8 or 9 years, or maybe 6 or 7 years, this whole process was being conveyed to them. People were talking about them. The battle between Rome and Persia, I mean, and which is found in Surah Rum, was something that was being discussed by them even before migration to Medina. And after the Prophet had actually gone to Tabuk to fight the Romans there, we find people talking about the fact that the Prophet had come and asking about him, about his details. So you see, all this process was being transferred, and people had this opportunity to come and ask those questions the way people who lived in Arabia had that opportunity. So the idolaters were given that opportunity for so many years. The people of the book were given those opportunities for so many years. And in a similar way, remember, these letters were sent in 6 or 7 Hijri, and the battle or the actual campaign that took place to attack those nations was 6 or 7 years after that. So it was that visual transmission of the process of Itmam al-Hujjah that was being transmitted. At the same time, people had the opportunity to come and ask questions and to clarify themselves. in any way they would like to. And even if that did not happen right at the time of battlefield or right at the time when the attack or the campaign of attack was made, even then, if anyone would have asked that they would like to know more about the Prophet himself or the whole campaign, that was granted just as it was granted to people who were living in Arabia. So I think that all that you need to understand is that the process was no different than what happened in Arabia. The only difference was the Prophet was physically present there in Arabia once in an era of the Meccan era and once in the Medina era. But this whole process of 22 years was like a visual transmission of the conclusive communication of truth to people around them. And if you look at the map, you'll find that these were the countries who were right adjacent to the Arabian territory. It was like just an extension of their borders, and people knew. I mean, it was just like extending the borders of Arabia, and all that was being done was that this message, without the Prophet going there, the whole visual transmission of that process had taken place. So I think we need to understand here what exactly is meant by Itmam al-Hujjah. It's not that you need to be always physically present there. As long as the message of that particular messenger of God is communicated in a way that the whole process becomes a visual evidence, people have the opportunity to come and ask questions, and at the same time they are able to witness what the Prophet or messenger has claimed. So if this is understood, I don't find any difficulty in communicating to people who might need to know that what exactly happened. And as far as the common man is concerned, remember they were standing at the back of the rulers as well. So it was the rulers who were basically attacked. I mean, the army which was attacked, and the common man who was there with them, or the masses who were there with them, they always had this opportunity, as I said, to ask questions. I mean, just before the battlefield, within the battlefield, or after that when they were taken to task. So all these opportunities which were there for the people of Arabia were also afforded to people who were outside Arabia. And also one more thing that we find from history, that as soon as some of the people belonging to the army of the companion, they stepped out of these 12 territories, they crossed these 12 territories, they were stopped. So we have clear reports of Caliph Umar stopping them once and telling them that we are not authorized to go beyond these borders, because this is the area, this is a demarcated area where this visual transmission of the process of Itmam al-Hujjah could have taken place, and all that we are doing is that we are just completing it. The Prophet had done the needful.
Thank you very much.
And,
oh, please go ahead.
Okay, I can ask another question. So another question is that there is a book of Hegel, and it talks about the origin and the evolution of morality, basically, because it talks about the how people lived, for example, thousands of years ago, and then how the institution of marriage came into being just because of the material reasons, like after agricultural revolution, when people wanted to have private property. And before that, there was no institution of marriage, and people could live in communist societies where everyone was supposed to be a husband or wife of everyone. And later, due to material reasons, institution of marriage came into being. So in Islam and other Abrahamic religions, marriage has a very sacred place, and it is called something that comes by nature. So doesn't it prove that maybe the ancient societies didn't have the same concepts of moralities and values, and didn't live the way we currently live today, and believe in these?
Well, what I can say is that just one book which is standing against established history is not something that we can treat with such importance that we think that whatever he has written or claimed is true. It is one person's interpretation. Otherwise, the established history is that people got married right after, people were born. Marriage was the only institution that existed. It is an established form of history. A person who's trying to negate that is standing in minority. He or she is making a claim that has no value or basis. It's just a claim that he is making, because as I said, established history tells us something very different. We just cannot, accept a person, he gets up and says something in philosophical jargon and claim that, well, people got married after the Industrial Revolution and before that they just lived as partners. I mean, what is the proof of this? I mean, it's just conjecture that he is putting forward.
Well, there are other historians and anthropologists as well who, come up with the same facts in their books. I don't have, I haven't researched it too well, but in anthropology and history, people do have,
As I said, these are what we call as marginalized theories. These are marginalized theories. I mean, they are theories which stand at the margin. They don't have any substance to them. People they keep coming up with these bizarre hypotheses which are not substantiated. I mean, anthropologists can get up and say something, and I mean, you can just claim anything without unless you present proof, and unless you present something which is in consonance with established history. How can we just accept you on the face of it? You have to give some proof for whatever you make claims.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. I'd like to end this with my question this session, since we're on the topic of dating. I was wondering, what kind of questions do you ask when you see someone? Because I'm almost tempted to interview everyone, but like you don't want to scare the other person, but at the same time you like, I feel like knowing everything just to make sure that if I am to make a decision, it's like the best decision possible. But like you said, it's also a gamble, so I'm really confused.
Well, you see, just take it naturally. The exposure that you get, I mean, is something which induces you with the right questions. You get to know the family, you get to know the person, the decency aspect, the honesty aspect, the person is to be a good gentleman. And at the same time, you need to know some of the history of that person, in particular, the time that he has spent in the last couple of years. For example, you should have some views of people to which he has had exposure, so that they can tell you more about that person. So this is like finding out some of the things that you'd like to find out. Of course, as I said, to be a person of decency, to be a man of his words, to be someone who would always like to be someone that you would like to relish as a partner. So these are all natural questions that come to your mind. So it's nothing very, I mean, there's no rocket science involved at all. You don't need to read about it. These things should come naturally, because you see, every person knows the life he or she would like to lead. The profession that he or she would like to follow, the place that they'd like to live. So you see, these are natural things which come up. If a person is living in New York and another person who he would like to get married is living maybe on the West Coast, like in California, then decision has to be made where they're going to live after marriage, or are they still to continue living separately. So you see, these are all specific questions which arise in relation to what the situation is. And as long as you are able to have a fair guess, I mean, that is all that you can do, because you just cannot have that perfect information. All that you can have is possible information.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saleem. We got a question in chat that is that says, when we advise a person to forgive the other, he or she comes up with two claims. If we keep forgiving, that person will never realize his mistake, or our attitude will show him up he is at mistake only when he'll control himself. And then the second response is, human has natural inclination of suppressing others and becoming dominant, especially relatives in Pakistani families. If we don't show reactions, they'll cross their limits. Apparently, these claims are true, as we see close ones exploiting others due to their soft natures. So people adopt harsh attitude as defense mechanism. In this scenario, what guideline we may present before them, as their claims are very strong?
You see, if you think that a person is incorrigible, which means that however much you might forgive that person, and the person continues with his bad habits or whatever he's doing wrong, I mean, you always have the option not to forgive him in one or more instances, so that you are able to make that person realize. So it's like a strategy that you have thought of well beforehand, that, well, yes, since the person is not realizing his or her mistakes and is persistent and adamant, so I'm going to teach him or her a lesson. I mean, talking to your own self, not meaning it in a very harsh way. And that is by telling him or her that for once that I'm not going to forgive you for that, and I mean, you need to mend your ways and you must behave yourself. So I think it's not always about forgiveness. It's a question always that you need to address whether a person is worth forgiving or not. At times they are not worth forgiving, and at times you need to take some stern action. But one thing is for sure to be followed, and that is one should not be harsh. You can be stern and be polite at the same time. So it's not that you always have to be harsh to be stern. You can be polite to be stern as well. So as long as you're polite in your sternness, it's fine that if you don't forgive that person for once, so that he or she would realize the folly.
We'll end the session here today. Inshallah, take your question. We'll take your question next time.